Hello, welcome to SC Prep, and today we're going to be talking about semicolons, one of the easiest places to get free points on the SAT. So let's talk about the rule for semicolons. A semicolon pretty much functions exactly like a period. They both separate two complete sentences. Let's look at an example. London is an old city. It has many modern buildings. London is an old city. It has many modern buildings. The first one, it had a period. The second one, it has a semicolon. The only difference between the two is that after the period, you need to capitalize the first letter, versus with the semicolon, you don't. So for a semicolon to be correct, like a period, you need a complete sentence before and you need a complete sentence after. If you don't, then the semicolon is wrong. The simplest way to think of semicolons is anywhere you can put a period, you can put a semicolon. Anywhere you can't put a period, you can't put a semicolon as well. And on the topic of periods, let's talk about the period test. All you do here is you replace the semicolon with the period. And if you get two complete sentences on either side, then it works. Otherwise, it's wrong. So let's look at the example. I studied all night. I still failed the test. The first half is a complete sentence, and the second half is also a complete sentence. Now let's look at the second example. I studied all night because the test was hard. The first half is a complete sentence, but the second half isn't. It's a dependent clause because of that because. Then the third example. London is an old city which has many modern buildings. Like the previous one, the second half is a sentence fragment, the which makes it a sentence fragment. Now let's talk about the elimination strategy that the SAT gives us for such problems. If both the choices use the same exact wording, but one has a semicolon and the other uses a period, then they're both wrong, since they both mean the exact same thing. The SAT can't have any controversial answers. And in just a few seconds, you've already eliminated two choices without reading the passage. You can use the SAT against itself like this. But there is a secondary rule, and this is for complex lists. So let's think about why we have this case. So imagine you just went off to spring break to all these places in the first example, and you write on your essay that your lit teacher wanted you to write, saying, I went to Nashville, Tennessee, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Pocatello, Idaho. Now, the problem is you can't tell what are the commas separating. You have Nashville, Tennessee, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Pocatello, Idaho, but are you separating between cities? Are you separating between states? You can't tell what is separating what. So the fix here is to upgrade into semicolons. I've been to Nashville, Tennessee, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Pocatello, Idaho. Here, the commas stay inside each item, which is the city, then the state. But the semicolons go in between these items to help you differentiate between each other. And the simplest way to spot this is if you see a semicolon that is followed by an and. This indicates that you have a complex list and that this is not a case where it's acting as a period. So to summarize, a semicolon 99.999% of the time functions exactly like a period. If you can put a period, you can put a semicolon. If you can't put a period, you can't put a semicolon. And the way you can test this out is through the period test, where you replace the semicolon with the period. Then you have the rare case with complex lists, where you then have to make these complex items that are being listed to be differentiated with semicolons. And the telltale sign for this is when you have a semicolon and then an and. And then one of the most important is the elimination strategy, where if you have both with a semicolon and a period, you can cross out both choices since they both mean the exact same thing. Now let's take a look at some practice problems. The photographer Dorothy Lange is best known for her images of migrant workers during the Great Depression. Her most famous photograph, Migrant Mother, has become one of the most widely reproduced images in blank, has appeared in countless textbooks, museums, and documentaries since it was first published in 1936. Now, the first thing I want to do is get rid of the parenthetical here, which is the migrant mother. There that goes. There that goes as well. You could read the same sentence without migrant mother and it would be completely correct. her most famous photograph has become one of the most widely reproduced images in history. Then you have the second part. It has appeared in countless textbooks, museums, and documentaries since it was first published in 1936. So now we have these four answer choices, and we can't use the elimination strategy since we don't have a period. So I've already read these sentences out, and I'm leaning towards B since, as a native English speaker, I can tell that these are two independent sentences. But if you aren't, or for more complicated sentences on the SAT, all you need to look for is the subject and the verb. And in this case, the subject is photograph, and the verb is going to be has, or the verb phrase, I would say, is going to be has become. So now you know that the first half is an independent sentence. But you need to know about the second half, since that could help you decide between A and B. So let's take a look reading it with it. It has appeared in countless textbooks, museums, and documentaries since it was first published in 1936. It is going to be the subject of this sentence since it's referring to the photograph in the previous, and like the previous sentence, we have has again as the verb. So we can already tell that B is going to be the right answer. So let's look at why A is wrong once again. You have the comma splice where you're trying to join two independent clauses by a comma alone, which is always going to be wrong. And then, hey, we're correct since we're joining two complete sentences with the semicolon. And then C is wrong since you're going to have a run-on sentence since you're combining these two independent clauses without any punctuation in between. And D might sound right when you're saying it, but it's not correct in standard written English. And since the SAT only follows the rules from standard written English, being that it is never going to work. And they're going to use something much more simple like a because or a since. So let's take a look at the hints on the side here. So once again, it's important to remember that the semicolon functions exactly like a period. That's why it's correct. That's why B is correct in this case. And once again, you can apply that by using the period test, replacing it with the period in your head. Let's look at this quick summary. The key insight here was that you were going in between two independent clauses. And the period test works since both were independent clauses, meaning the semicolon can work there as well. And hey, A was wrong since you had the comma splice. B is correct since they were both two complete sentences. C was wrong since it was a run-on, and D was wrong since we never accept that in standard written English. So let's move on to the next problem. Arctic foxes are among the hardiest animals on the planet, capable of surviving temperatures as low as -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Their thick fur changes with the color blank, allows them to retain camouflage in both the white snowscape of winter and the brown tundra of summer. I'm going to replace seasons and which since they're the only options here into the blank. Their thick fur changes color with the seasons, which allows them to remain camouflaged in both the white snowscape of winter and the brown tundra of summer. Here, we can already tell that there is no complete sentence. If we go back way before when I was talking about the three examples, which creates a dependent clause. And with the dependent clause and the independent clause, you can only connect them with a comma, which means C is going to be the correct answer. Also, if you guys did look carefully, A and B both have the period and semicolon, which means they're both going to be wrong automatically using the elimination strategy. And that's exactly what the hints were saying. They both had a semicolon and a period, so you can cross out both options. And like I mentioned earlier, which creates a dependent clause and not a complete sentence. So every single case, the period will fail, which means the semicolon is going to fail as well. It's sentence fragment, so A is wrong. B, same thing as the A, so they're both eliminated. C is the only way to connect them, and D is missing its punctuation. So here's a quick summary. A and B both are the exact same, so with the elimination strategy, you can get rid of both of them, which means you're going to have a dependent clause, and when you're going in between C and D, the only way you can correctly connect both of them is through a comma, which means D is wrong and C is the correct answer. Now let's move on to the hard question. And I'm already seeing that there is a semicolon and an and here. So I'm already leaning towards option B, but let's just double check by reading through the entire thing. In her analysis of 20th century labor movements, historian Eva Chen argues that successful movements typically shared three recurring patterns, including organizing campaigns that relied on grassroots, blank, strikes that targeted specific industries, particularly textiles and steel, and political alliances with progressive legislators who championed workers' rights. I don't think we can get much information from that, but what we can do is look at the specific punctuation of the sentence. So we already highlighted the comma and so now we got to figure out where else this list is going to be working. So including organizing campaigns that relied on grassroots movements, you will have the comma and you see what she's talking about here, the successive movements and the recurring patterns. So you know that there's a list that's going to be coming in here, and because of that, you can already lean towards B. Once again, the comma is too weak here since you have a complex list here and the complex items require the semicolon. And once again, because of the semicolon and B is the only right answer, and the C would end up ending the entire list mid-sentence, so that would create grammatical problems later on. And D doesn't work since you can only have the and connecting the last and the second last items in the complex list. So let's take a look at a quick summary of this. The semicolon here is not going to be joining the two sentences. It's acting in its case as a complex list. A is wrong since the comma is too weak, and we've already seen the semicolon and right there. Then C is also wrong since the period would end this list halfway. D is wrong since the and only goes between the second to last and the last item. And B is the only one since it's the only one that could properly connect these two complex lists. Now let's do a quick summary of semicolons. A semicolon functions exactly the same as a period. If you have a complete sentence, if you have a complete sentence before and a complete sentence after, a period works and a semicolon works. If it doesn't, then they both can. And you can do this through the period test. And then you have the rare case with complex lists where you need to upgrade into semicolons to separate these complex items. And then most importantly, you have the elimination strategy, since if the semicolon and the period function the same, that means they both can't be right. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to subscribe and keep on the grind. And I'd love to see you for the next video where colons on the SAT are not what you think.